useless woman! If you're done cleaning, get out of here." It was Christmas, and I was thrown out into the snowy, freezing garden. "Hey, it's cold. At least let me change my clothes." My body was covered in sweat from a day's worth of housework, and my wet clothes were rapidly stealing my body heat. "There you go." From inside the house, my mother-in-law, Nancy, threw my bag, coat, and shoes outside with a look of annoyance. The front door and windows were locked from the inside, and I couldn't get back in. I felt like I was going to freeze to death. I had to do something. My name is Mary, and I'm 50 years old. I work a part-time job as a cashier at a local supermarket. My husband Charles is a construction worker, and it's been 25 years since we got married. We've always lived in a small apartment, but a few years ago our only son, John, moved out to go to college. And since then, the room has felt both bigger and lonelier. We were never financially well off, but we managed to send our son to college. Last year he got married and moved to a condominium in the next town with his wife, Jessica, starting their life together. Around that time, Charles approached me and asked, "What do you think about moving in with my mom?" After Charles' father, David, passed away from an illness about 10 years ago, Nancy has been living alone. Our apartment wasn't far from her house, so we would visit her once or twice a month to check on her. Nancy in her late 70s seemed to be doing well, but Charles said he wanted to be there to take care of her just in case, given her age. Charles is an only child, and he seemed worried about his mother growing older. Feeling a bit lonely since our son got married, I could empathize with Nancy's situation and agreed to Charles' offer to live together. Charles' childhood home had a garden and, although a bit old, had enough rooms. A light renovation would make it spacious enough for the three of us to live comfortably. We didn't have enough money to build a new house, but we had enough saved up for the down payment on the renovation. The remaining cost could be covered by a loan. Through Charles' work connections, we found a renovation contractor, and the work was completed in about a month. Since we knew the contractor, they finished the job for less than the market rate, which helped us save money. I am not an old lady, you know. Jeez. Nancy put on a brave face, but she seemed to like the newly renovated house. Our son helped us move the heavy furniture, and the move was done in no time. Sitting in the newly renovated living room drinking coffee with 3 generations of family, I felt a warmth in my heart, as if we were experiencing a family reunion for the first time in a long while. When we began living with Nancy, I noticed she hardly did anything around the house. Previously, whenever we'd pop in for a visit, it was never for long, so I hadn't really paid it much mind. When she lived alone, it seemed she just cleaned what was visible and barely did any other housework. She hardly cooked for herself, mostly relying on pre-packaged meals and supermarket deli foods. No wonder I found so many empty plastic trays and food containers in the house before we renovated, I thought to myself. It made sense to me. When I asked Charles about it, he mentioned she had always been that way, often using ready-made or frozen meals. I had heard that Nancy used to work full-time, so initially, I thought maybe her busy schedule was to blame. But now, even with all the time in the world at home, she doesn't cook, clean, or do laundry. Nothing. All those tasks fall on me, while she enjoys chatting over coffee with friends who come to visit. "Mary, make some coffee. Haven't you boiled any water? Do that at least." I'd hear Nancy's voice calling out to me almost every day. "I only let you guys move in because my son insisted, but you know, she's quite thoughtless," she would say to her friends. I never asked to move in with her. It was Charles who insisted because he was worried about his mom. He felt obligated to stay with her. If she's having friends over, the least she could do is prepare the coffee herself. I wish she wouldn't badmouth me as if I'm the one at fault. I still have my part-time job. When I'm not working, I'm swamped with housework from dawn to dusk with no time for myself. Every day, without fail, another friend of Nancy's drops by. At this rate, I wondered if there was even a need to live together. Being friends with Nancy, they seem quite alike. "Oh, I forgot to bring cookies. Mary, was it? Could you buy some? They treat me like a servant and not even reimburse me. When I brought this up to Nancy, she'd laugh it off. Don't be so pity. Lighten up. Every week, she'd dress up and go out shopping or somewhere with her friends, not returning till late. Meanwhile, I'd be drowning in housework. Charles, maybe because he's busy at work, would often come home late. On rare occasions he came home early, he'd be drunk and just go to sleep. Whenever I tried to discuss Nancy's behavior with him during such times, he'd snap, "Quit nagging. Mom's always been like that." If I approached him sober, he'd just dismissively say, "She's getting old, let her be." "You might tolerate it because she's your mom, but think about what I have to deal with," I'd retort. Yeah, I got it, I'll talk to her," he'd say, but then just fall asleep snoring. I considered discussing it with our son, but I hesitated to burden the young couple with our problems. As December rolled in, I got a call that Charles had an accident at work. I rushed to the hospital. Thankfully, his life wasn't in danger, but he had fractured his leg. We were now set to spend Christmas in the hospital. Normally, my son comes home for Christmas and we spend the holiday together, but this year he got married and I was wondering what to do. So, Nancy, I know this is a weird time to ask, but what are you doing for Christmas? Charles won't be able to leave the hospital for a while, and I'm not sure how to spend Christmas at my in-laws, so I decided to ask Nancy. She responded, "Christmas? What did you used to do?" "I used to spend it with John, my son. He would come home and we'd be together," I replied. "Well, why don't you go to John's? You're a family. There's no need to be shy," she suggested. Even though he's my son, I feel like I'd be intruding on the newlyweds, and I feel bad about it. But Nancy has a point. I decided to call my son and see what he says. If he says no, I'll figure something out then. I called John on his mobile phone and explained that Charles is injured and will be spending Christmas in the hospital. "So what will you do, Mom?" he asked. I braced myself for rejection and asked, "Well, I was wondering if I could come to your place." To my surprise, he agreed. "Sure, Jessica wants to have a good chat with you too. It works out perfectly." I was taken aback by how easily he agreed. When I told Nancy, she was pleased and said, "Yes, that's good. Take your time," she said, seeming to be in an unusually good mood. I asked her, "What about you, Nancy? What will you do?" "Me? Oh, I'll be fine by myself," she replied. I was surprised by her response, as I was expecting her to be busy during Christmas. "So, I'll finish up the housework and head over to John's on Christmas Day," I told her. On our way back from the hospital, Nancy and I talked about our plans. It was the coldest day of the year, with snow flurries in the air. I had prepared everything the night before, so in the morning I was busy wiping windows and cleaning the kitchen. Even Nancy, who usually doesn't do much, helped me clean the floors in the shower room. I was surprised by her helpfulness. After finishing the cleaning inside the house, I picked up a broom and started sweeping the yard. It felt warm when I first stepped outside, but as the day went on, it got colder. I planned to go inside to put on more layers, but when I tried to open the front door, it was locked. I walked around the house, but all the doors were locked. I wonder if Nancy forgot I was outside and locked the door. "Nancy, please open up." I called out to Nancy in a loud voice. "Are you still here? I thought you left a while ago." I heard Nancy's voice from inside. My sweaty body started to feel cold, and I couldn't stop shivering. "I haven't changed yet, and my luggage is still inside. Please, I'm begging you to open the door." I raised my voice in desperation. "There. Isn't the cleaning done already? Hurry up and go," Nancy said while roughly throwing my rolling bag, shoes, and coat through the large window next to the front door. After that, no matter how much I screamed, there was no response from inside. With no other choice, I put on the cleaning sandals instead of my shoes, wrapped my coat around my chilled body, and walked to the bus stop. My son's condominium is about a 20-minute bus ride from my in-laws' house. "Mom, you're late. I was about to go pick you up because I was worried." My son greeted me at the entrance of his condominium after I pressed the intercom button on the first floor. "Mary, long time no see." I was greeted with a smile by my son's wife, Jessica, as she let me in the room. This is the first time I've seen Jessica since their wedding. She's a petite woman with a cute smile. "Mom, you look frozen. Did something happen?" I told my son about how I was locked out by Nancy while gardening. "Mary, go take a shower and warm up your chilled body first," Jessica said kindly. Her words touched my heart, and I felt like I was about to cry. "Thank you, I'll do just that," I said, and Jessica showed me to the shower room. As I took a warm shower, I could feel the warmth gradually returning to the core of my body and the sensation returning to my fingertips. It's been a while since I've taken such a leisurely shower. I felt a sense of peace that I had almost forgotten. Once I felt relieved and the hard things I had been through came flooding back, I started crying again. After the shower, a meal was prepared. "I'm not sure if it's to your liking, but please go ahead." Having a meal prepared for me without having to cook myself. It's been years since that last happened. I took a bite. Delicious. It was a nostalgic taste. "Jessica, you're a great cook," I complimented her. "Ah, I asked my mom for the recipe and practiced for today. I'm so happy. Thank you," Jessica said with a shy smile. It's been a while since I've had such an enjoyable meal. After the meal, I felt happy as I helped Jessica clean up the dishes. I didn't want to ruin the mood, but I began to quietly talk about what happened at my in-laws' house. My son considerately asked Jessica to leave the room. He probably didn't want her to hear too much. After listening to my whole story, my son seemed to remember something and said, "By the way, Nancy didn't pay much attention to me when I was little, and she didn't seem too happy either. Come to think of it, we only took him to his grandparents' house when he was little. It seems it wasn't just because he got busy playing with his friends that he stopped visiting them. She once told me to go away when I visited," he added. My son had his own thoughts about Nancy. He continued, "But I didn't think it was that bad. Once things settle down, let's go visit Nancy together," he said. Since we started living together, Nancy has treated me terribly, but today was a bit strange even compared to that. I felt relieved knowing that my son would be with me. After pouring out what was in my heart, I felt much lighter. I never thought we could talk about this kind of thing. My son has really grown up. The next morning, as per my usual routine, I got up early and was relaxing in the living room watching TV. I thought about preparing breakfast, but I didn't want to touch the kitchen without permission, so I decided to take it easy. My son and his wife were still asleep. Suddenly the phone rang. Who could it be this early in the morning? I wondered as I checked the display. It was my in-law's number. Surprised, I answered the phone, and a male voice that I didn't recognize spoke from the other end. "Nancy's in trouble. Please help." Nancy? That's my mother-in-law's name, but whose voice was that? "Who are you? Why are you there?" I asked. The man on the other end stuttered, Then the call was cut off. A bad feeling washed over me, and I quickly woke up my son. We headed to my in-laws' house together. When we arrived, the front door was unlocked. "Nancy?" We called out as we entered the house, but there was no response. My son and I cautiously proceeded inside. We didn't know the identity of the man from the phone call or if he was still there. There was no sign of anyone in the living room. We could hear the sound of running water from the shower room, so we went to check and found Nancy lying on the floor, unconscious but breathing. "John, call an ambulance, hurry!" I shouted to my son. At the emergency hospital, Nancy was receiving life-saving treatment. She was diagnosed with a cerebral hemorrhage, and although she pulled through, she was still unconscious, so visitors were not allowed. We couldn't ask Nancy what happened between Christmas night and the morning, leaving us in the dark about the situation. I started visiting the hospital every day, but it wasn't until a week after Nancy had been admitted that she regained consciousness. By that time, Charles had also recovered enough to walk with crutches, so he had been discharged from the hospital. However, he wasn't quite used to the crutches yet and couldn't walk for long periods, so I was the only one who ended up going to visit Nancy. When I arrived at the hospital, Nancy was still bedridden. "Thank goodness you're okay, Nancy." I spoke to her, but Nancy just silently stared at the ceiling. "I received a call for John." The moment I mentioned that, Nancy looked at me in surprise. "Who was it from?" Nancy asked. I didn't know. I was the one who answered the phone, but I didn't recognize the person. Nancy just silently murmured, "I see. It was a man. Why was he at our house so early in the morning?" The front door was left wide open. Who was that man whose voice I heard? I pressed her for answers. "Just a friend's husband," Nancy replied. Even if that were true, it was outrageous for him to visit so early in the morning. Besides, it was strange that the door had been left open. After locking me out, someone had unlocked it from the inside, and Nancy had been found collapsed in the shower. Even if someone had come to visit, they wouldn't have been able to enter the house and find Nancy had the door been locked. Also, the man had called John's condominium for my in-laws' phone. When I pressed Nancy further, she finally started to open up. "Alright, I'll tell you. That man was my lover, from even before I married David. And he was my lover while David was alive too. Are you happy now? Just leave me alone." I was dumbfounded by my mother-in-law's confession. She had brought her lover into our house during Christmas when we were away, and she had locked me out because he was already inside. I wonder when he had entered the house. She also revealed that after the renovation, she and her lover had planned to kick us out of my in-laws' house and live there together. It was an unbelievable story. They say late life love is a thing, but I wish they would just do it without involving us. I didn't want to be a part of it. In that case, please have him take care of you. We don't want to know anything about it. David is gone, and you are free to do as you please, I told Nancy. "You ungrateful brat! How dare you talk to me like that?" Nancy scolded me. She may have been bedridden, but her mouth was as sharp as ever. "Who's ungrateful? I've been doing all the housework while juggling a part-time job. The house is clean because we paid for it, remember?" With that, I left the hospital room. I could hear Nancy's sobs and curses behind me, but I didn't care. She could do whatever she wanted. When I returned to my in-laws' house, I told Charles everything. His response was shocking. "Ah, that guy. I've known about him for a long time. Dad's gone and Mom's all alone. Just let it go," Charles said. My head started spinning. How dare she try to kick us out after we spent money on renovations? Can you really ask me to forgive that? I was furious and yelled at Charles. "If Mom says so, we just have to put up with it." Charles said that to me, but I couldn't even look him in the eye. "Fine. I can't live with you any longer. I'm leaving," I said, pushing him away. "Don't say that. We've gotten along for over 20 years. Charles tried to stop me in panic, but my mind was made up. No. Nancy wants her freedom, and I'm going to take mine too. My son is married and has a happy family. There's no need for us to be husband and wife anymore. You're old enough. How about you graduate from Nancy too? I have no interest in a 50-year-old man who can't escape from being a mama's boy." Charles turned red and looked like he wanted to say something, but he was silenced by my words and said nothing. Now he just has to talk to Nancy and figure it out. I want nothing to do with them anymore. Later, Charles and I got divorced. For now, I've decided to live with my son and his wife until I find a place. My son says, "You can live with us as long as you want." but I want to enjoy my freedom for a while. I'll gratefully accept their offer in spirit. Meanwhile, Jessica is expecting a baby. I plan to help my son and his wife with the baby, but I don't want to interfere too much. I'll wait until they ask for help. Enjoying the growth of a child is a privilege of the parents. Children grow up in the blink of an eye. I hope they cherish their time as a family. Nancy has been discharged from the hospital, but she's paralyzed and now lives in a wheelchair. I heard her lover was married, so she didn't want to make a big fuss. So when Nancy collapsed, she didn't call an ambulance and instead called a number registered in her phone, which happened to be John's condo. The man disappeared without a word. All the friends who used to visit stopped coming and her lover abandoned her. Now she can't move freely and lives a difficult life. Charles might be fired from his company because his broken leg hasn't fully healed and he's no use in field work. I, on the other hand, have been promoted from part-time to full-time, and I'm about to find a new apartment. I'm looking forward to enjoying the second chapter of my life.